Hi everyone, glad you could join us today. We're going to continue talking about spiritual warfare, looking at the weapons of our warfare. Now, last time we talked about the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. And we looked at how we use the Word of God to strike down the lies of the enemy. Today we're going to look at our testimony, the power of our testimony to strengthen us, to strengthen others, so that the enemy cannot use fear to hold us back. Now, before we get started, hey, if you're not a subscriber, I want to encourage you to hit that subscribe button. I do believe this channel will bless you and help you in the journey that the Lord has for you. After the video is over, if this video has blessed you, be sure to like it and share it so that it can be a blessing to others. Now, testimony. What is testimony? What does the word mean? Well, testimony, as it is used in the New Testament, really holds this meaning of this idea of giving evidence, producing evidence. It can be used as testimony, witness, record, report. And so as I look at this idea of producing evidence, I see the writers of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they produced evidence. They kept a record of what Jesus was doing, and they gave a report of it. And so our testimony, it involves us keeping record of how God saved us and all the great things that He's done in our life, and then giving report of that, how He saved us and how He brought us out of our sin and all the wonderful things He continues to do. Now, testimony is powerful and doesn't require you to memorize a lot of scriptures. It just requires you to remember what God has done for you. We see a great example of this in John chapter 9, where Jesus comes upon this blind man who has been blind from birth. And through the course of the story, the blind man receives his sight back, which angers those in leadership that did not like Jesus. And so some of the Pharisees were very angry about this. And they eventually called the man who was once blind, and they are trying to get him to say that Jesus was a sinner. And look at what the man says. Look at his report. This is found in John chapter 9, verse 25. He answers and said, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see." You see, the blind man didn't have to know a lot of scriptures. All he had to do was keep a record of what Jesus had done for him and then give a report of it. That was his testimony. That testimony was powerful. And your testimony has the ability to create courage in you so that you can move forward in the direction that God has prepared for you, the direction that is filled with God's blessings and goodness and His mercy. You see, the enemy wants to use fear on us, and fear is like a ball and chain that holds us down and keeps us from moving in the direction that God has prepared for us and the path of blessing and goodness and mercy. I want to look at two great examples where we can see where a record was kept, one where a record was kept and then reported on, how it gave the person strength to move forward into what God has prepared for them, and another example where a record was not kept, so no report could be given, and the people failed to receive the blessing that God had for them. Now, our first one is of David. When he faces the giant Goliath, David is just a teenager. He's come to bring food to his brothers. He sees the giant, and the giant is shouting out all these cursings to the people of God, and David cannot believe what he is seeing. And David decides, hey, I'll do something about it. So he's brought before the king, and Saul tells David, how are you, just a boy, gonna face this giant, this man of war who's been fighting for all these years? How are you gonna do this? You see, fear has gripped Saul just like it's gripped all of the army of Israel, but not David, because David has kept a record of what God has done, and now he's going to give a report of it. And look what David says. This is in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 34 through 36. It says, But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. You see, David remembered what God had done for him. He kept a record of how God had come through for him in the past, and God was moving David forward into the greatness that he had for him. Because David had kept record, he was able to give report of how God had blessed him. It strengthened him, it strengthened others, and David was able to move into the future that God had planned for him. Now I want to look at another story found in the book of Psalms, Psalm 78. And this is a story where the people of Ephraim, the warriors of Ephraim, had forgot how God had come through for them in the past, the wonders that he had done for their people. They forgot his testimony. They forgot it. They were well equipped, ready to receive what God had for them, but they forgot what he had done. Fear gripped them, and they failed to move forward. You see, that's the difference between courage and fear, friends. See, courage is not the absence of the emotional feeling of dread. It's the refusal to allow it to keep me still. Fear is like a ball and chain that holds me down. The enemy uses it to hold me from what God has for me. Look what it says. This is in the book of Psalms, chapter 78, verses 9 through 11. The children of Ephraim, being armed and carrying bows, turned back in the day of battle. They did not keep the covenant of God. They refused to walk in his law and forgot his works and his wonders that he had shown them. The warriors of Ephraim were prepared. They were ready. They could have moved forward, but they forgot all about what God had done. They weren't keeping his law. They forgot his mercy and his goodness, how he had come through for them in the past, and they turned back in the day of battle. And that is what fear will do for you. And this is the power of the testimony. When the enemy comes to me and says, you can't do that, God's going to fail, God's not going to come through for you, you have kept a record of what God has done for you, and you begin to give a report of how God has come through for you in the past and how he's going to do it again. You see, the things we speak about are the things we think about, and how we're thinking is going to determine how we act. This is why Paul said in the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verse 8, he said, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. So the things that we think about, they create a reality for us. That's how our perspective, our understanding of the world is created by what we think. Whether it's right or wrong, it creates a reality and we act on it. And so, with our testimony, if we're keeping record about how God has come through for us in the past, and we're giving a report on it, and it's creating this image in our mind about how God will not fail us, how he has blessed us, how he has come through for us, it's going to allow us to just be consumed with God's love, building faith in us, moving us forward into what he has for us. We won't be able to be held back. On the other hand, if we fail to keep record and we fail to give a report of how God has come through for us, if we're like Ephraim and we forget all about it, we'll have this false perspective that God will fail us, that he's not going to be able to come through for us, that he can't make it work. We'll feel like all hope is lost, and we'll act accordingly, and we'll miss what God has for us. I want to tell you that your testimony is so powerful to create a reality for you. When the enemy comes against you, trying to hold you back by fear, your testimony creates a true reality of God's goodness, his inability to fail you, and it allows you to move forward in the direction that God has for you, regardless of what your eyes behold. You move in faith because you are consumed with God's love. Don't allow fear to overwhelm you. Keep a record of what God has done and report on it. It will strengthen you. It will strengthen others. It is an incredible, powerful tool. Well, I pray this lesson has blessed you and strengthened you. I know God's got great things for you. We are moving forward. Our King is returning, and we don't want to give the enemy any place in our life, allowing him to stop us, to keep us dormant, to lose our potential. Keep a record. Give a report. It'll strengthen you and others. Hey, if this lesson, this video has blessed you, I ask that you would just hit the like button and then share it so that it can be a blessing to others. Look forward to seeing you next time. Be blessed.